excited to host Patrick Chopson, co-founder and chief product officer at Cove.tool. So first of all, Patrick, welcome on the show. I've been following Cove.tool for a while, so amazing things you're building there. So can't wait to know more about how you started.
Oh man, this is really exciting. I love talking with folks about technology and architecture and engineering, how we're going to change the world and hopefully slow down climate change, what or at the very least just make sure we get to go home and see our families in the evening.
Yeah. So Patrick, if I may ask, like, what are three highlights of your career till date? What would those be?
Oh man, I think the number one was getting our daylight simulation engine working. So Daniel, who's my co-founder and CTO, who's also my brother, Daniel Chopson. So when we were trying to figure out how to build a daylight engine, and I've been doing all the research and we've been trying different things. And, that first moment that we've been up late, been working for a long time. And then like, it was about like 9 o'clock at night. It like ran for the first time properly and like delivered the results we were looking for. It was a pretty exciting moment. It was like, yeah, it's working, that kind of, that kind of thing. So I think that was definitely one of the highlights for me, for sure. And then I think the second highlight for me was another simulation thing was writing my own energy modeling engine and it compiled for the first time. Um, I think that was also pretty cool. And then I think the third highlight for me would be also just starting the business the very first day with Sandeep Ahuja, who's also my other founder. Um, and she and I, we both, we were driving home from work. We were like working at Perkins and Will, big mega firm, and we were like, you know what? I think we should start our own business and do something cool. And I was like, I've always wanted to do that too. And we were like, okay, let's do it. And so then we're like, well, if we this was on like a Monday, and I was like, well, if by Thursday we feel like we still want to do this, then we should just turn in our resignation. So on Thursday we were like, yeah, we're both down for it. So we put in our 2 weeks notice and then we started doing our own thing. So I think like that for me was like the also the highlight is that thrill of like, oh God, like
That's good.
what are we gonna do now?
Yeah, so like when you decided to start, like, it's just your thrill of starting a company. You had like no MVP. You were just like, oh, we want to build something. Like, let's go for it. So,
Yeah.
tell me, like from the seed, like after that point to your first highlight of getting the engine running, like what was the time period
Oh
and how
man.
the you navigated?
Yeah, so at first, all we had was some scripts that I had cobbled together that did cost and energy optimizations. So these are like written in Python, like, and I had to like run something, copy the results to spreadsheet, run another thing. And so obviously that was very slow, but that was still faster than like what other people were doing, which would take like 60 hours. I could do it in like a day. But and so that was interesting. Providing that as consulting services for the first, I would say, year is what we were doing. So from like 2015, I guess, to 2016 or so, we were kind of like just doing stuff. So like, also I'm a licensed architect, so I was also designing houses and light commercial and getting architecture revenue. So we were kind of funding all this just with bootstrapping, like just trying to find money wherever we could. And so that was like pretty difficult because obviously you can't fund too much software development with you know whatever's left over from architecture projects. But I think like that was like the really hard part was just making it through that. So from 2015 to like 2017, it was all just kind of like bootstrapping and building stuff. And then I was like, we're never people were asking us, hey, we want to buy the script that you have. I was like, it's not really the software. I do stuff and then I make a presentation at the end. But so it's kind of, I guess, what you see a lot of nowadays, software enabled architecture and consulting. So then I got Daniel Chopson as my brother. I was like, Daniel, I've been talking to him for like 6, 9 months. I was like, Daniel, we gotta like, you gotta come join Sandeep and I. We're gonna like got this really cool idea and it could be really big. So then he finally was like, okay, fine. I'm your younger brother. I trust you, as one does. And then we really got him in. And once Daniel came in, he came from like an enterprise software as a service background doing financial software for Sage. So once you have like somebody like that who knows how to deploy and build enterprise level web based software, that suddenly transformed everything, and we were able to actually start growing it. And then it was 2017, like in November of 2017, that we had our MVP that we launched at Greenbuild. And then from there, we just kind of kept building more pieces until we got to our first seed round, which was, or pre-seed round, I guess, which would have been 2018. And then 2019, we got that daylight engine working. And then after that, it really took off. And then most recently, we raised a Series B in November/December of 2021 from Robert Downey Jr., which was pretty cool, and also Cove.tool, which is one of the largest VC funds out there. So kind of a, it was not, it was a very, very gradual, not much money, and then really took off once we had a product that people actually would buy.
Oh man, that's awesome. And I'm curious to know when you say like getting the first daylight engine working. So tell us like from the scripts which does energy performance to building an engine, like what are ways you had to like develop the product and what goes into it?
Yeah, I think the most important thing was that I spent a lot of time with the customers themselves. So I was like actually on the road, traveling, going to different cities. So I was in a different city every day, trying to sell the cost versus energy. So that's why it's called Cove.tool, cost versus energy tool. And people are like, "This is amazing. Obviously, reducing the cost of your billing by 2 to 3%. That's pretty cool. Like, we could see ourselves maybe using that, but we don't have a daily use case for this software. So I can't really, I mean, I'll pay you $3,000 a year, but I don't want to give you 20, that kind of thing. So I think what we, from all those customer kind of interviews and being in the room with people and like convincing the first few folks to buy it, they were like, this is great, but now I have to learn another software for daylighting. And I need a visual component to tie it together. So then we spent probably 8 months building in 20, I guess it'd be 2019, I guess. Yeah, I think that's when that was. Yeah, 2019, we were just like building out all those daylight simulation engines and things like that. And it just took a while. But then once that first thing went live, started getting those sales immediately. And that's when we knew we had, okay, this is like a for real thing that everyone wants to purchase. So I think that was like, for me, like the kind of that grind process was basically really getting into the weeds and doing the research. Like like I could have used Grasshopper or I could have used some type of script, but I was like, I really need to understand the fundamental science behind computing daylight from the sky to the bouncing it around and getting it to a point inside of a building. Like I think just reading the papers and then going back in time to read papers from the 1980s that were written when things were more computationally light because our tool is web based. So we're like, we can't have like this high computational cost thing that we're doing on the front end. So we had to figure out a way to run it in AWS on the server side. And so that was like the most important thing is like go find those old 1980s papers. Let's read those. Let's read the ones in the 90s. Oh, they're adding more variables, but is it becoming more accurate? Not really. So then like, okay, so let's focus on these computationally light models first. Um, so things like that.
Got it. And like your case is very interesting because you had like a service model where you're providing like business service for performance and then you productivized that service, and like your role also has technical part, but as you were mentioning you went to customers, so it's like learning how to sell stuff. Like what are some new skills you figured out along this
Mm.
journey?
Yeah, I think like the most important thing is to acknowledge people's skepticism of whatever it is that you're building. So obviously as a co-founder, you're somewhat relentlessly optimistic about like what it is that you're building. But at the same time, you have to be realistic and you have to be able to talk to them and say like, hey guys, you know, I understand what you're saying. That's legitimate. But what is the problem we're trying to solve? Like being able to reframe from a selling skills perspective, being able to frame what is a successful trial look like what is it that we're trying to do? Like, because if you just say, look, here's technology, people will be like, oh, let me see if I can poke holes in it. Like what are the things that it doesn't do? It's like, no, you have to help people see like, I'm showing you something really cool. Here's what it does do. Here's the value proposition. Here's how it's going to make your life better, and here's what we need to do to successfully trial that and make sure that you are comfortable that you can go to your CFO and purchase this. I think the other thing I learned is that like selling to architects and engineers is different than other things. There's all these different stakeholders. So a multi-stakeholder deal, learning what type of sales process that requires and what type of salesperson that needs, those are like really, really different skills, I would say, than what you would be used to if you were selling any other software where it's like a clear buyer's persona. There's might be 10 people you have to talk to.
Got it. And we know that like running a startup or a company, there are lots of ups and downs. Like, what was the most challenging moment in this
Oh
go-to
man,
journey?
I think one of the challenging moments was like I would say like probably like December of 2019. We had a lot of committed people who had said that they were going to pay, and they started to close. But then I was still like on the road, and there was times where I would have like five meetings per day, like in New York, and like in New York City, it's like to get from one meeting to the next in under an hour can be really challenging if you're going on those long blocks
Yeah.
in the I guess it's the east-west direction. So it's like to go from and not all the and like for example, Foster and Partners, their office is way out on a pier. So one time I had to run like with my backpack and all my laptop and everything. I had to go from the transit station, all the way there in like 15 minutes in the just run, like Jason Bourning it, like, and that was like one of those experiences where it's like you're like in the moment, you're like this is hell, but like at the end, you're like that was actually kind of a fun story. But getting there right on time, doing a presentation, and having to immediately go in the next one, like that was a pretty challenging, I would say. But yeah, I think that's the part that was kind of low. The low part was just being away from home so much and traveling.
Yeah.
You think it's going to be business travel, seems like it's fun until you do it.
I see. And like it's like AEC is a complex industry, and having like a starting a company, finding product market fit is challenging. So like what is your like piece of advice for founders or students who are planning to chart their entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that you try to make something and try to do what you're going to do, and don't let people tell you no that you can't do something. Like listen to them, but like don't take it to heart. Like if you pitch to an investor and they're like, "We're going to pass. This doesn't fit our thing. We don't see the value." If they say we don't see the value proposition or this doesn't look like a legit thing, don't take that to heart. Let it fall off. It's like someone is going to see the thing that you see because only you know the problem. If you're solving a problem, you know what the problem is more than other people. You just have to figure out how am I going to communicate that to other people in a way that makes sense to them from both a financial perspective, a product perspective, a technology perspective. Usually, the the technical explanation is not hard. Like, here's how we do it. Here's the demo. uh, the hardest ones are if you're trying to raise money off a PowerPoint. Then I suppose that could be challenging. But I feel like in the AEC space, most time you're raising money off of an actual, somewhat working prototype. So I think the technical side isn't as hard, but I think what architects and engineers struggle with is what is the business thing? Do I have a pro forma spreadsheet that shows the use of funds? Do I have like an understanding of the total addressable market? Like I may be able to articulate everything else, but then my slide about TAM doesn't make sense to an average investor. Like those are the things like the finance part and understanding how that works from a VC perspective is the hardest part, I would say, for a AC startup person. But ultimately, the thing that you need to focus on the most, I would say, when you're about to go pitch, and just making sure that if you're it takes some people it's going to take 3 pitches, other people take 30, 50, 100 pitches, but knowing that there is someone out there who wants what you're making, if you got that validation. So I think like believing in yourself enough to say like I take feedback, but I don't let it hurt me. And then once you get an investor, just making sure you have good investors that aren't taking advantage of you, that aren't putting in crazy terms, people that are actually good and helpful, because there's money, but not all of it's created equal. So like maybe your uncle will give you dollars, but is that really the kind of advice that you want?
Yeah.
maybe you want somebody who's a B2B SaaS person, if that's what your business model is.
Interesting. And what's coming next for Cove.tool?
Oh man, so many things. So we ramped our software team really big at the beginning of 2022, and we've been kind of like building a lot of product and it's kind of behind the scenes for a while, and then now we're just kind of launching all of our new things. Like, so we just recently launched a new dashboard. We're relaunching our drawing tool, which allows you to visualize that all of our analysis in 3D. We got our load modeling tool for HVAC engineers, our analysis. We're still building more pieces than that. But the thing I'm most excited about is our assembly builder, which allows us to incorporate manufacturers into our platform by getting all the different pieces in each wall or window or roof. And then also our embodied carbon tool. So we're able to calculate for an embodied carbon calculation for the structure to within like 98% of what an engineer would have done for an actual building. And
That's
that's like a level of accuracy that's like unheard of. So I'm just really excited about that, but mostly excited about like this way that we're creating what I call the building information network, which is where we're connecting people together instead of like trying to create walled gardens. We're using APIs. We're getting the information to flow through our platform rather than get stuck inside, like maybe one of those legacy builders out there.
got it. And like from your experience, what has been the most challenging part to do this analysis at scale? Like
Mm.
what's the friction in the industry or within the firms?
Yeah, it's not like, again, it's not really the technical thing. Like building simulation software is challenging, but it's like that's not really the hardest part. It's like, how do I articulate the use case for this software that makes sense to the different people that have to use it for it to be effective? So like I think like for your average architect, they know that climate change is happening. They know that their process is bad, and they know that they need a tool that fixes that. But your mid-level project manager is like, well, I only want to do things that make me money, and if someone has to get retrained, I don't want them to do that. The top level people at the top of the firm are like, we got to make these 2030 commitments, or we got to like help our clients see that we're a digitally enabled technologically savvy practice. So they get it. So the bottom and the top are they got it all figured out, right? Kids from school know what to do. Principals who are from the maybe graduate in the 70s, and they know what to do. And then it's the guys in the middle. The middle managers are the ones that are the biggest blockers to technology typically, but not for the reason that they don't want to adopt it, because they're probably savvy themselves. It's just that they feel like their pay is connected to incentives that aren't connected with the adoption of technology. Like they'll just work their junior staff 60 hours instead of 50 or 40. But really, technology should be able to cover the gap between 40 versus 80 hours. So but they don't think about the problem as a business problem. They think about it as an art problem, where it's like I just do more stuff to make more beautiful art rather than I want to make art, but I also want to make it efficiently. Like that's what you see a lot with like the generative image builders like uh, Dali and things like that. Is you're doing beautiful things maybe or Mid Journey or whatever. You're able to make beautiful, compelling images faster. Maybe even better than what you could have done before yourself. So it's like the relationship between technology and design is like the thing that's less understood by some tiers in the organizations.
Got it. And since we are talking about Dali and Midjourney, like what do you think like are the potential opportunities of using AI in our design process and why we haven't seen that adoption at scale yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think usually architecture is not, and construction generally is behind the curve, but it's coming. I've seen, because we have an API tool product that we allow people to run our simulations inside their software. I talked to a lot of other startups. The generative space right now is just absolutely overflowing with really good ideas of people that are going to make it. Funding has been secured. Like, you can't look further than TestFit or Snaptrude or some of these other really good startups that are out there. Another one I saw recently is Make It. They're like a really generative design tool for floor plans for houses, for instance. So you kind of see all these like uh, startups that are doing generative design. I think I'm not going to say next year, but I say year after next, you may see that the level of interaction between the human and the machine is going to be at least approaching the current, you know, DALI mid journey type level of interaction that you see, where you can choose options and then further refine them and analyze them. I think we're going to see more and more of that over the next, probably not next year, but maybe year to 2 years out is what I would say.
I see. So more easy UI UX integration in the design exploration phase.
Because now we have larger and larger data sets that are tagged, right? So it's like with GPT-3 and some of these other like tools that exist, like there's pre-built AI packages that can be plugged into it. So it's just we need to make sure we have enough tagged data. And you can kind of see that a lot of these startups that are web-based applications, they have tagged data because it's in a database on a server. Now the infrastructure is starting to exist that would make that technology applicable. So we're really seeing that on our side too. We're tagging all our data, making big databases, connecting everything together, turn a text-based AI loose inside of a massive data set, you're going to start finding connections. But then it also opens up possibilities that we could provide inputs and prompts and generate things as well. But my thing is, I've seen a lot of generative tools have come and gone. Some of them are focused on like generating boxes, kind of is what I would call them. But it's like if you focus only on the geometric aspect, then you're going to lose track of like buildings are both geometry and data together. So you have to see it as a complete data model of a building. You have to know where that thing is and what it is, which was really the promise of BIM originally. But BIM is obviously a file, so it kind of precludes the possibility that it could be a live interactive database.
Mhm. And what do you think about metaverse and blockchain for
Oh man.
AEC?
Oh man, I have not too much faith in like blockchain. Metaverse, I'm more like interested in because I feel like I don't understand it as much. But for my sense is that the metaverse will continue to be a place that people explore concepts and ideas. But ultimately, I think anything you do has to tie back some way to the real world. So I think maybe the metaverse becomes a place that we play around and come up with ideas, and maybe all design work gets done there eventually. Uh, and then you build it outside of the metaverse. So there's a consequence or a connection between that. But blockchain stuff, a lot of times for me, it's just a way of like maybe last year getting more investment. Um, Now I think everyone's waking up to the fact that blockchain can't solve every problem. So I think like the really financial problems, maybe it's where it gets applied first, and it remains to be seen, in my opinion, what other things it could be applicable for. That's
I
just me,
see.
though.
No, no, I just wanted to know your thoughts.
Yeah.
And can you share the culture at Cove.tool and how does a day in your life look like?
Oh, yeah. So the culture at Code.tool is really focused on problem solving. So it's like what I say is like if you find something that's not working, don't complain about it or say like I wish it could be better. Go find a way to make it better. So it's like everyone's empowered to travel across teams to be like, hey, because we got 70 people, so it's like, hey, we need to talk to each other. Like, let's go over the sales, find out why the sales guys are having trouble with this thing. What is the solution? So I think that kind of like everyone kind of getting the information and figuring out what the problem is quickly. So we have this. So our research process is called our R2D2 process. So it's our research to design connections. We follow what they call practice-driven research. So we're using like people who are using the tool. We gather their feedback in live chat. We pull that into our software kind of product planning, and we give that to the actual software team and say like, hey, what do you guys think? Is this possible? Not possible? How long does this take? So we're kind of identifying the critical path elements, and then so it's basically agile workflow, but kind of following those things together in that cycle means that we can travel from someone's complaint or problem or idea to like a developed feature or product within about 2 months, which has allowed us to give us more design cycles. So design cycles are like the key in architecture, but also in software to like achieving a much better product because you've been through more iterations of the idea. So it's not so like, oh, 2022 release of Cove.tool. It's like, no, it's like the March, second week of March release, instead, in the fourth week of March. So it's like every 2 weeks, because on a web app, you can deploy a change or a fix or something.
I
So that's kind of
see.
like our day is mostly just, for me, now that now it's a bigger company, it's mostly just finding the resources for someone to do their job. Um, but I think earlier it was more like actually maybe doing some of the work. But I do less of that now.
I see. And like, are there any like trick tricks or techniques which helped you in like recruiting or building your
Mm.
team?
Yeah, I think like the most important thing is to actually just do cool stuff, and talk about it. So talking about it on LinkedIn, showing what it is you're doing, showing your work, your process, and showing the kind of culture that you have of, like have saying like, here's what we're doing, here's why we do it, explaining why you think the way you think or why you approach what you're doing in a public way, and allowing people to see a preview of that process that they're going to encounter when they're actually on the team really kind of generates that. And then I think just making sure that kind of do things like what we're doing here, talk about online with others, being open to all possibilities and ideas, and just kind of transmitting to other people that if you come here and you got an idea, I'm like, thank goodness I don't have to have that idea. Like now you had it, so now I can just bless that. And I think that's been the most, from a recruiting standpoint, most important part is just demonstrating that we're going places. And never helps to have, never hurts, I guess, to have Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man on your investment team. That does help with recruiting quite a bit.
Yeah, that's awesome. When I like first got to know about it, I was like quite happy like to see that engagement.
Yeah.
And I was thinking when you were building the product, how did you determine the right pricing for your services?
Mm. Yeah, that's a good question. I think what you have to do, one, you always got to do a competitor assessment, like what do they do. Then you have to think about what is the value that I'm giving to the client, to the end user. Like, what is the task that they would do now, and then how much time does it take them to do it? How much time does it take in our tool, and and then show the value, the ROI, I guess. Like if you did, so for example, like with our tool, if I told someone, if you use the software and you avoid one design revision per project team per year, that's about a 4 to 6% increase in profit for your company. How much is that worth to you? And then we want to take a very small fraction of that. So that kind of helps price it appropriately, because then you're giving a business argument to the CFO or CEO of a company or head principal, like, here's what we're going to give you. You're going to get X, and here's the value that that delivers. So I think instead of like pricing it necessarily just based on what will people take, you kind of have to like do the math ahead of time, and it kind of then you can always back your way into like what I should be charging for it. Now, obviously, sometimes if you're a new player and you have a new product, you may have to do a pilot. You may have to do a letter of intent that says we'll purchase it if it does X. You may have to give people a big discount for the first 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is, to be able to get them to like make that leap to trust a company. But really, architecture engineering is a big influencer market if you really think about it. So you just have to get the top 10% of firms, a certain percentage of them to start using something, then everyone else kind of lines up behind them. So.
Yeah, that's a great insight. And are most of your customers based in US or now you're going
Mm.
global?
Yes, we have users in Japan, South Korea, Australia. We have uh, over 20,000 users and about 25,000 plus projects. So kind of like some people make a lot, some people make only one. So there's that, but yeah, definitely US and Canada are like a lot of our customers, but also UK is a big user because everyone's trying to solve the embodied carbon problem. So we're kind of like working on those things with folks. So kind of like your more multinational firms, like your three-letter firms, those are the ones that kind of adopt technology typically first, and then whenever there's a recession, those are the ones that spend more money on technology because that's how they keep getting bigger. Is they're more efficient, they make more money per person than the other smaller firms. So you kind of start to see those trends that you're not aware of when you're just an individual contributor in a company.
I see. The reason I asked is like sometimes you might get into a dilemma whether okay you want to expand your current market or
Mm.
you want to serve new market, and both of them requires new features. So how do you prioritize the feature building in the product?
Yeah, I think 40% of AEC services is North America. So I think you kind of want to first kind of make sure that you're covering the largest part of your TAM, for sure. And that's a challenge for European software companies. Is a lot of times they get like funding from the government in Europe, and they build something that's well fitted to France or Germany, but then they forget that like that's a small market. So if you want to make it bigger and get more funding, you're going to have to look abroad. But I would say like architecture and engineering is broadly the same practice around the world because of the influence of North American architects and engineers. There's a relatively like I could go as an architect and work in Vienna, and there would be some things that would be different. Like I'd be working in millimeters versus inches, but like India versus Atlanta, it's similar, it's different, but one person's using concrete. In America, we might use wood for the same thing, but like at the end of the day, it's really the same process of delivering a building, unless maybe you're in Japan, and then there is a little bit different. But there's like very similar commonalities because you're still drawing in 2D at the end of the day, or 3D and converting to 2D, or whatever it is that the process is. And everybody's educated each other. There's the international kind of like Corbu, world that's circulated the globe. You can go to any country in the world and the buildings look similar. It's because the process is also similar too.
I see. And like, what would be a good strategy to like get the first customers for your
Mm.
product? Like, one way I could think is you could go to conference, network with the technical officers of this big architecture firms and get that first meeting, or what
Yeah, I think my advice is go actually talk to someone in person at their firm, that get a personal connection, show them what you're working on. Like probably going to a conference as your first move, I wouldn't recommend that because like, really when you're starting out so new like that, it's a relationship that you're trying to form. Like I'm building something crazy. I need someone to trust me. So just like you're pitching to your investors, you're also pitching to these in the same way. It's kind of like being interviewed for a job. You approach it that way. It'll if you honestly if you follow that process of that you followed before for getting a job, and you say like, hey, I'm asking you to trust me to invest in this. I promise you it's going to be great. Even if some problems come up, you and I have shook hands. We looked each other in the eye and we said like, I got you. Like that's what people need in that initial thing. Because once you have validation in the market, then people are like, oh, it's just software company, well, whatever. But like initially, they're like, whoa, you don't have any customers, and you're coming to me, like, whoa. Like you have to like do things to give people confidence, and confidence is built human to human, typically.
I see. That's a great answer, because like the initial credibility is difficult. Okay, how many like they want testimonials or past use cases, and like okay, you are my first customer. But
Yeah,
okay, I have a rapid fire round to wrap up the interview, so
let's do it.
you'll have like 10 seconds to answer it. Okay, which cities are in your travel bucket list?
Mm. Barcelona, Vancouver, and Toronto are definitely my faves.
Yeah, your favorite movie?
I would say Blade Runner.
Is there any mentor or role model which made a big impact in your life?
Oh man, Godfrey Augenbro from Georgia Tech he absolutely changed my life. Going to school and working there for him. He actually I was actually not going to make it into the school because my application didn't get accepted, and then he let me in after the deadline. So if he hadn't done that, my life would be totally different.
I see. What is one thing which most people don't know about you, but will be surprised to know that?
Mm, I think they would be surprised that I really like EDM music and going to concerts.
I see. Is there anything you wish you would have done differently?
Mm. I wish I would have definitely. I think sales is like the one thing. Like I wish I would have been more savvy on hiring the first salesperson or first 10 salespeople. You don't know until you know what it is that's going to work. But I think like you can never be too proactive about fixing and modifying your sales workflow for your business.
I see. And what are your hobbies?
Oh man, my hobbies are I love riding my bike. I live in Atlanta. We have this thing called the Beltline. It's like a really nice trail where everyone is out there running and biking. That's one of my hobbies. I love golf, and I also like building Lego sets. So I still got a little inner child. So,
That's awesome. Is there anything which we didn't cover in this interview and you'd like to end on that note?
oh man, I think I would just end by saying that like the more that you really just work at the math of what it is and the fundamentals of like what is it, what is the unit economics of this thing that I'm making. If you really focus on that, no one can stop you. Because if the unit economics and the data and the math works, somebody's going to give you money for that. And I think like that is the thing that has really propelled me forward is always just like breaking a problem down into component parts, solving each one as an engineering workflow, and just realizing that there's no one is so smart that they know more than you. Like as long as you have good math, math doesn't lie.
Awesome. Uh, Thanks a lot, Patrick. And I must say, like, it was indeed, I had a great time meeting you at the Cove.tool party in Chicago at AI, and you are a very friendly person. So, if anyone watching, feel free to reach out to Patrick.
Yeah, I love talking to people who are starting startups. I always give advice. I'll look at pitch decks for folks. Anything that people need to. I want to see more people succeed. That's my. And that's also good for us too, because you know we have APIs, so that helps us. But at the end of the day, I really appreciate what other people's approach is, what they're doing, because it's always different. And it's like, oh man, this person's succeeding just makes me happy.
Awesome. All right. Have a great rest of your week. Thanks a lot for your time.
Oh,
Bye.
awesome. Always.